Hi guys, Dr. Pulley here. Today we're going to be going over Chapter 9 reading questions, Chapter 9 Section 4 reading questions. As a reminder to you, always if you're going in looking for the questions, make sure you are going in through this daily assignments folder, which you can get through either by clicking on it, or if we scroll down, you can get to it by going into the unit folder and going down into the assignment folder to find that green folder in there, which is the daily reading assignments and lecture videos, because you have to do those things in order. So moving on here to Chapter 9, Section 4. The questions are, we're looking at, this is Emerging Europe and the Byzantine Empire, which is the chapter. And in this section, we're looking at what was the major characteristics of the Byzantine Empire. Very much like the Roman Empire, only it's now just the eastern part of the empire. And instead of Latin is sort of like an official legal language, but most people are speaking Greek in this part of the world. Impact of the Crusades on Europe and the Middle East, it has radical changes for both. Biggest thing for Europe is some political changes we'll talk about, as well as some changes in terms of not just the feudal structure, but also in them looking more outside of Europe instead of just locally as it was. Because remember, feudalism is that local, decentralized type of government. And then finally, cities such as Florence, how did they flourish? Well, one of the best ways to find out more about that is to watch the crash course videos. I'm not going to record those. You can go watch those. Part of that is they're ferrying people down to the Crusades in Jerusalem, not actually getting there in the Fourth Crusade, and actually using Crusaders to defeat some of their rivals. This doesn't sound right. So let's get started. Okay, here. Here's the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire, and he briefly reestablished the Roman Empire in the Mediterranean. That's Theodora's husband, Justinian, who Theodora convinced to stay during riots when his other advisors told him he should leave. All his greatest accomplishments come after these riots, or political riots, and he stays, and as his wife asks him to, and he's victorious. The body of civil law, or the corpus juris civis, or the corpus of civil law, also known as Justinian's Code, true or false here, simplified a vast quantity of law materials and was the basis of imperial law in Eastern Europe, Eastern Roman Empire until its end in 1453. That is true. 1453, you may recall from John Green's Crash Course video, was the fall of the Roman Empire in the 15th century. Remember again, the 1400s are the 15th century. Okay, so another question on that same lines here of centuries. In the beginning of the 800s, and I put in here as a warning you might want to ask, the Eastern Roman Empire consisted of only the Balkans and Asia Minor. This is what historians call the Byzantine Empire. Well, that is false. It says in the book, in the beginning of the 8th century, that's the 700s. Moving on here, because it was the emperor who appointed the head of the Eastern Orthodox Church, he exercised control over the church as well as the state. What is the head of the Eastern Orthodox Church called? That is a patriarch, which comes from the Latin term patri, which has to do with father. A patriarch is sort of like the lead male figure of a family today as well. And again, that was what we refer to as Caesio-Popism, where the Caesar or emperor is over the Pope or the leader of the church. Okay, before the 12th century, Constantinople was the largest city in Europe in the Middle Ages, its greatest center of commerce and the chief center of exchange of products between the West and East. That's absolutely true. Okay, I'm going to go to the map here for a second because we're talking about what is sort of like the eastern part of the empire. So think if you kind of drew a line in through here, and this part of what was part of the Roman Empire, while the western part is all sort of fallen apart as we've seen earlier, this part's still there. Constantinople is right in here, and I'm going to have to zoom in if it'll let me on the Dardanelles. Is here. So what is today Istanbul was Constantinople, was Byzantium, and this is the trade spot that is sort of, in a nice strategic place to be between things coming from Asia, going to the Middle East over to here. Okay, moving on here. Oops, went to the wrong tab. Okay, question number 6. Okay, in a dispute over who is the sole head of the Christian faith, Pope Leo IX and Patriarch Michael Cyrillus excommunicated each other, which means you can't take place in any of the official church sacraments, which is the same as getting a go directly to hell card or go directly to jail card in Monopoly. Okay, this led to a split or what between the two branches of Christianity. That is a schism. So there's a schism or a split between the two of those. Don't, however, confuse this with the Great Schism, which was between two branches of the Roman Catholic Church when we had a pope in Avignon in France and another pope in Rome in Italy. Okay, number 7 here. Okay, from the 11th to the 13th century, early Christians carried out a series of military expeditions to regain the Holy Land from the Muslims. These expeditions are known as the Crusades. The Crusades. Number 8. Come on. It's another word for unbeliever. This is the Arabic word infidel, which means unbeliever. It originally referred to anyone who didn't believe either in Muhammad or who wasn't a Christian or a Jew. It later came to refer to anyone who wasn't a Muslim. Okay, this crusade was called for after the fall of one of the 4 Latin Crusader states, but its campaign was a total failure. That is the Second Crusade. In fact, if you watch the crash course video on the Crusades, which is what you should be doing after this, then you'll find that John says it's so unimportant, it bores him, and he doesn't even talk about it, really. It kind of fell apart on the way there. This crusade was led by the King of France, the King of England, and the Emperor of Germany, called the Crusade of the Three Kings sometimes. It captured some coastal states, but access to Christian pilgrims to Jerusalem had to be negotiated with Saladin. That is the Third Crusade. Okay, so keep in mind, Three Kings, Third Crusade. That's Philip II of France, Philip II Augustus. King Richard I, Richard the Lionhearted of England, who was mostly French, and the Emperor Barbarossa of Germany, who drowns in a river, either taking a bath or trying to cross it, depending on whose accounts you read, on the way there and never even got there. Saladin, by the way, has the coolest nickname. It's Saladin the Magnificent. He is the Muslim leader who has captured Jerusalem, and they have to try and get it from. Number 11, this crusade captured Antioch in 1098, took Jerusalem in 1099 among a horrible massacre of inhabitants. That's the First Crusade. It's the Second Crusade, then it falls apart. The Third Crusade gets back some things, not a whole lot. I don't know about you, but promising 40 to 50,000 people if you surrender and come out of Jerusalem, will let you go free, and then murdering them all is not really a Christian thing to do. And finally, number 12 here, if it will go there. Go back to 12 here. 12 here, one of the greatest impacts of Crusades was political. As during this time period, feudalism broke down, nobles lost power, and kings were able to create stronger central governments. That's true. That's the big effect on Europe, is that feudalism loses power and centralized kings and monarchies as we know them, and big kings of big countries in Europe. That's when it starts to really become important in Europe. As for the Middle East, it brought them into more contact with Europe, not always in good ways, but it does open avenues for trade, and there's a huge transfer of knowledge and science and information and, cultural diffusion as well. So that's section 4. The other thing I want you to do is make sure you go in, and I'm going to go to the course again, and go to the video page. And on the page, there are 2 crash course videos, not one, but 2 crash course videos I'd like you to watch before you finish your study guides, which are due for your next class period. These are on the Crusades down here, as you can see, and then skip over the one that says Russia, but come down to, I'm scrolling too far here, this one on medieval Europe. This is a new Crash Course World History series they're doing, Crash Course European History. The one on medieval Europe is the first one in the series, but it does a nice job of sort of covering a little bit of last chapter, a little bit of this chapter, and sort of even previewing where we're going after this. So watch the one on the Crusades up here and the one on medieval Europe. Don't forget your study guides. They are due next class period for us. That is, of course, Thursday. See you then.